They said I ruined my sister's wedding. That I was jealous, petty, and desperate for attention. That I staged my big day to upstage hers. But the truth? I wasn't even invited to her wedding. I let that sit for a second because even now it still sounds surreal. The accusations didn't come months later in whispered gossip. They began the very night of my own wedding. While I was cutting my cake, smiling for photographs, they were already rewriting my story in another ballroom miles away. But I'll take you back to where it began. My name is Clara Whitmore, and I was 28 years old on the day I married Lucas. He's 30, a software engineer, and the kind of man who makes small things like fixing a broken cabinet or remembering how I take my tea feel like love songs. To me, he has always been a soft landing. The same can't be said about my family. I'm the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, both in their 50s now. Growing up, I thought love was a currency you had to earn. My parents didn't hand it out freely. They gave it in doses, and most of those doses went straight to my younger sister, Emily. Emily, 3 years younger than me, could do no wrong. She was charming, dramatic, and had a flair for drawing attention the way a flame draws moths. If I was the steady one, the responsible one, she was the glittering star. And my parents preferred glitter. My best friend since childhood was Hannah, who once swore under the bleachers that she'd be by my side for every milestone of my life. Somewhere along the way, though, she began to drift. I didn't realize how far until my wedding day. And then there's Maggie, a woman who came into my life during college, steady and loyal in a way I never knew I needed. She doesn't sugarcoat the truth, which is both painful and life-saving at times. So those are the players in this story. Now let me take you to the day itself. The morning of my wedding felt like sunlight poured into a glass. The conservatory we chose was an old brick building with a glass ceiling that made the sky part of the decor. By noon, the place smelled of lemon zest and fresh flowers. The string quartet tuned their instruments while light scattered across the floor like broken diamonds. When I walked down the aisle, my veil brushed softly against my cheeks every time I breathed. Lucas stood at the end, his eyes damp, looking at me as though I was both a surprise and a promise. My heart should have been nothing but joy. But joy is never that simple when absence shouts louder than presence. For rows of chairs on the left side of the aisle sat perfectly empty. White programs tied with twine, napkins folded like unopened letters, and placards with names written in looping script. My family's names, waited untouched. My mother's favorite perfume should have lingered in that air. My father's cough laugh should have rattled through the quiet. Emily's dramatic eye roll should have been caught in the corner of my vision. Hannah's shoulder bump should have steadied me. But there was nothing. Just pollen dusting the empty seats. Just silence carving itself into me like a quiet blade. When the doors opened and I stepped forward, everyone rose. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, people who had chosen me in their own ways. They smiled, clapped softly, and filled the room with warmth. It should have drowned out the ache. For a moment it almost did. But I speak the language of absence fluently. And those empty chairs screamed. 8 months before that day, I had sent my family a photo of the venue, excited like any bride-to-be. Hours later, Emily called with news. She was engaged. 2 weeks after that, her glossy gold-foiled invitations landed in everyone's mailboxes. Her engagement party would be on the very same day as my wedding. Not just close to it, exactly on it. When I protested, my mother simply said, "We'll make it work, dear," which in Midwestern translation means, "We won't." My father sent a thumbs-up emoji 3 days later. The truth is, they never intended to make it work. Back at my wedding, the officiant's voice was steady as he spoke about love being patient and kind. Lucas squeezed my hands, mouthing, "Breathe with me." I did. I promised forever with a voice that trembled only once. Not from doubt, but because every vow tugged against the invisible rope tying me to another ballroom where my family was toasting someone else. We kissed, and the room erupted. Rose petals flew. Cocktail hour spilled into the garden, laughter bubbling against the conservatory glass. My college roommate Jess hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my breath. The kids of friends ran circles around my ankles. I laughed when I was supposed to, smiled when cameras turned my way. But at the edge of every smile was that hollow space where my family should have been. By dinner, long tables stitched the room together into a quilt of faces who chose me. The scent of chicken piccata and lemon risotto floated through the air. Lucas's best man told a story about him trying to fix a garbage disposal with nothing but a whisk and sheer optimism, and everyone laughed so hard we had to pause before the next toast. I tried to bottle their warmth, pouring it into the cracks left behind by absence. It wasn't enough. 2 weeks before I had asked my mother one last time. "Are you coming?" "It's complicated," she said. "Emily's future in-laws flew in from Europe. We can't be in 2 places at once." "My wedding isn't a place," I told her calmly, because rage gets me labeled dramatic. "It's my life." She sighed the way she sighs when the waiter brings the wrong order. "You'll understand when you have children." That was the hinge finally swinging shut. During the toasts, the greenhouse glass caught my reflection. A woman who looked like me but steadier, smiling despite the empty rows glinting behind her like teeth. I lifted my glass anyway. "To the ones who showed up," I said. My voice cracked, but only Lucas noticed. He kissed my knuckles. The room cheered. Later, under string lights, we danced. Lucas whispered, "Still with me?" "Always," I said. And I meant it. We cut the cake, lemon with raspberry buttercream, the knife engraved with our initials. Everyone crowded close with phones in the air. I laughed, real and unguarded. For a moment, joy was louder than absence, until my phone began to buzz. First I ignored it. Then the vibration crawled across the china, tapping the champagne flute like a trapped bee. I picked it up, still smiling, still holding the cake knife with Lucas. My screen lit up. 52 missed calls. All from Mom. The edges of the room blurred. Sound thinning as if someone turned down the world. 52 calls meant emergency in any language. Sirens, hospital corridors, apologies arriving too late. Lucas leaned in. "What is it?" "Nothing," I whispered, but my hand trembled. The phone buzzed again. And again. By the time I excused myself to the conservatory garden, lanterns swaying like caught fireflies, the count was at 57. I answered the next call, bracing myself. But it wasn't my mother's voice. It was Maggie's, urgent and low. "Clara, you won't believe this," she said. "They're telling everyone at Emily's party that you planned your wedding to sabotage her engagement. They're saying you staged it to steal her spotlight." Her words fell like stones into my chest. "What? That's insane. I set my date months before Emily even got engaged." "I know," Maggie said quickly. "But your mom is saying it like it's fact. And people believe her. Even your dad's laughing about how you're not close to the family. So it makes sense no one showed up." The gravel beneath my feet tilted. My chest hollowed. "My own father," I whispered. "I wish I was making this up," Maggie said. Her voice softened. "And Hannah's here, Clara. She's not defending you. She's telling people she couldn't be your maid of honor because you were too difficult about the guest list." I gripped the phone tighter, the lanterns above me blurring in my vision. My best friend. My sister. My parents. In one night, they recast me as a villain. And the cruelest part. They did it while I was still wearing my wedding dress, while cake crumbs sweetened my lips, while confetti clung to my hair. That was the night I realized absence was only the beginning. Betrayal had teeth, and it had chosen to bite me on the happiest day of my life. The first time I saw the necklace, it wasn't in person. It was in a photograph. A friend texted me the morning after my wedding with a link to Emily's engagement party album. Curiosity got the better of me. Click. The photos loaded in bursts. Emily with her fiancé under crystal chandeliers, Emily laughing with champagne tilted in her hand, Emily cutting into a tiered cake while my parents beamed behind her. But then there it was. Around Emily's throat glimmered a delicate chain with a pendant that shimmered like frost in sunlight. I knew it instantly. My grandmother's diamond necklace. Not just any heirloom. My heirloom. When I was 19, sitting at her kitchen table with tea that smelled faintly of roses, my grandmother unclasped that necklace from her own neck. She had pressed it into my palm with hands softened by age and said, "This is yours, Clara. For your wedding day. I wore it at mine and your mother at hers. You'll carry us forward." I had cried, overwhelmed by the weight of both metal and meaning. She smiled, brushing my tears with fingers that smelled faintly of lavender lotion. "Promise me you'll wear it when the time comes." Promise. But in those photos, Emily wore it. Emily. The sister who had always been the sunbeam in my parents' eyes. The girl who could shatter glass with her tantrums and be soothed with candy. My stomach dropped. My hands shook. I stared at that picture until my vision blurred, as though if I looked long enough, the necklace might dissolve back into memory where it belonged. But it didn't. It stayed cold and bright against my sister's collarbone. The necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was years of whispered comfort, of my grandmother's gentle belief in me, of a promise that for once, something would belong solely to me. Growing up, Emily got everything first, though she was younger. She got the bigger bedroom after I left for college, even though I returned every holiday. She got the front seat every car ride, even when I was the older one. She got the louder applause, the longer hugs, the better gifts. I still remember one Christmas morning. I unwrapped a stack of second-hand books, spines cracked and pages yellowed. I smiled, thanked my parents, and tucked them into my lap. Moments later, Emily unwrapped the latest iPod, gleaming in metallic pink. The room exploded with applause, as though she had invented music itself. Birthdays were worse. On my 12th, my cake collapsed slightly in the middle. My mother laughed and called it charming. A year later, Emily's party had a tiered fondant masterpiece in the shape of a castle. I spent that day holding balloons, fetching plates, and watching her twirl in a tiara while everyone called her a princess. Even in academics, where I quietly excelled, the spotlight tilted toward her. I brought home straight A's and my father said, "Good job." Emily earned a B+ on a science project shaped like a volcano, and he clapped until his hands turned red. So maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Maybe I should have expected the necklace to land on Emily's neck the way everything else did. But expectation doesn't dull betrayal, it sharpens it. I didn't confront my parents immediately. Instead I waited. And that's when the voicemail came. My phone buzzed one evening as Lucas and I sat on the couch, our takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. I let it go to voicemail, not wanting their voices to sour the taste of sesame noodles. Later, when Lucas went to wash dishes, I pressed play. My mother's voice spilled out, calm and clinical. "Clara, I hope you're settling back after the wedding. Emily looked beautiful last night, didn't she? I know you must have seen the photos. Don't start overreacting about the necklace. It's just jewelry. Besides, you know Emily's always been closer to your grandmother. Anyway, she's in a bit of a bind with catering for the engagement party. The baker cancelled last minute, and since you're good with details, I told her you'd help fix it. Be a team player, Clara. Call me back." I sat frozen. "Just jewelry." The words slashed across every memory of my grandmother's promise. My mother didn't even acknowledge it was supposed to be mine. She dismissed it like a trinket from a thrift shop. And then the audacity to ask me to fix Emily's catering problem. To step in as the invisible scaffolding propping up my sister's perfect life. I replayed the voicemail 3 times. Each time my chest tightened until breathing hurt. That was the breaking point. For years, I had swallowed injustice like bitter pills. But something inside me shifted that night. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was fury. Maybe it was grief too raw to stay hidden. Instead of deleting the voicemail, I saved it. Then I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it simply, "For Later." I dragged the voicemail in. Then I took screenshots of texts from my mother dismissing my wedding as small potatoes compared to Emily's. Screenshots of Emily mocking my dress on a group chat. Messages from Hannah explaining she couldn't stand up with me because she couldn't handle family drama. One by one I collected them. Evidence, not just memories. Proof of what had really happened. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Each file I saved steadied me, like bricks laid into a foundation. My story had been twisted, but here in this folder I could start reclaiming it. Lucas noticed the shift, though I didn't tell him everything. He found me late one night hunched over the laptop, eyes red from tears and screen light. He didn't ask questions right away. He just brought me a mug of chamomile tea, set it beside me, and kissed the top of my head. "You don't have to explain," he said softly. "Just don't carry it alone." His voice was an anchor in the storm, pulling me back to something solid. I didn't tell him about the necklace or the voicemail or the screenshots. Not yet. But I let him hold me. I let his arms remind me that family didn't have to mean blood. And as I leaned into him, the folder on my desktop glowed like a quiet flame. For the first time, I wasn't collapsing under the weight of their betrayal. I was gathering it, shaping it, storing it. Not to lash out. Not yet. But to be ready. Because I finally understood. Silence was no longer protection. It was complicity. And I was done being complicit in my own erasure. That night, as I crawled into bed beside Lucas, I whispered to myself, "They can steal my necklace. They can steal my family. But they will not steal my story." And with that, I began to transform my grief into something sharper. Not revenge, at least not yet. Something else. Determination. Because when people take everything from you, your family, your inheritance, your reputation, you're left with two choices. Collapse under the loss or build something new from the rubble. Chose to build. At first, I threw myself into work just to stay afloat. I worked for a non-profit that provided healthcare access to underserved women. Pap smears, prenatal vitamins, cancer screenings, things most people take for granted, but that can mean life or death when you can't afford them. I'd always been dedicated, but something shifted after the wedding. I stopped playing small. I stopped waiting to be noticed. When the director hesitated to apply for a government grant, worrying the process was too complicated, I volunteered to draft the proposal myself. I stayed up nights cross-referencing statistics, weaving stories of women whose lives we had already touched. I refused to let their voices be silenced the way mine had been. 2 months later, the grant was approved. $500,000. For the first time in my life, I saw my name printed in the acknowledgement letter. Special thanks to Clara Whitmore for her leadership and vision. My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt since childhood. Validation, untainted by favoritism, earned by sweat and grit. From there, I tackled project after project. I rewrote outdated manuals, persuaded donors at luncheons, coordinated health fairs in neighborhoods most people ignored. My boss started introducing me as our rising star. And when the program director announced her retirement, I was offered the role. Me. Clara Whitmore. The jealous sister. The difficult daughter. The invisible one. Said yes. But work wasn't enough. I wanted something that was mine, not just inherited from someone else's mission. That's how the mentorship program started. It began small. 3 young women, all juggling ideas for businesses but paralyzed by lack of guidance. We met in a borrowed conference room at the library, sitting cross-legged on the carpet with notebooks scattered around us. I listened to them describe dreams that sounded impossible but pulsed with raw fire. A bakery that offered training for single mothers, a clothing line made entirely from recycled fabric, a mobile app connecting women in rural towns to telehealth. They looked at me with a kind of reverence I wasn't used to. They believed I had wisdom to give. And for once I did. Week by week we met. I helped them refine pitches, find grants, connect with local partners. Word spread. 3 became 10. 10 became 30. Soon the library room was too small, and a local cafe offered their back room for free because what you're doing matters. Before I knew it, local newspapers were running blurbs about the Whitmore Women's Network, though I never wanted my last name tied to it. The city awarded us a small grant. We launched a website. Strangers began emailing me asking how to join. And one night, sitting in that cafe surrounded by women laughing, brainstorming, daring to imagine futures no one had told them they could have, I realized something. This was family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I was building. Meanwhile, Lucas and I bought a house. Not a sprawling mansion like the kind Emily plastered across her Instagram, but a modest two-story with creaky floorboards and a garden that smelled of jasmine at night. We painted the walls ourselves, left fingerprints in the corners, and filled the kitchen with second-hand mugs and mismatched plates. It wasn't perfect. It was ours. And soon it became a gathering place. Maggie came over every Sunday for dinner, armed with wine and gossip about Emily's latest drama. My colleagues dropped by for impromptu karaoke nights, our off-key voices shaking the walls. Birthdays were celebrated with sheet cakes from the grocery store, candles melting into waxy puddles while we laughed until our stomachs hurt. For the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I was surrounded by it. Maggie, loyal as ever, became my reluctant bridge back to the Whitmores. She still attended some of Emily's events, partly out of morbid curiosity, partly to feed me updates I didn't ask for but sometimes needed to hear. Like the time she told me Emily's husband had already started resenting her extravagant spending habits. He practically choked when she said she wanted to redo the kitchen backsplash for the third time this year, Maggie whispered over spaghetti. Or when she mentioned that Emily had posted a crying selfie after a fight, captioned, "Even fairy tales have villains." I knew who the villain was supposed to be. And yet, instead of pain, I felt nothing, maybe even pity. Because while Emily was busy polishing her spotlight, I was busy building something lasting. There's a photo I keep framed on our mantel. It's from one of our first mentorship meetings, a candid shot Maggie took when I wasn't looking. I'm sitting on the floor, cross-legged, surrounded by women scribbling notes. My hands are mid-gesture, my mouth open as I speak, my eyes lit with something I barely recognize in old pictures of me. Oi. The kind of joy that doesn't need validation, applause, or a parent's approval. The kind of joy that comes from giving what you never received. Sometimes late at night, Lucas will catch me staring at that photo. "You're proud of yourself," he'll say gently, almost as if it's a discovery. And I'll nod because I am. For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for someone else to hand me worth. I'm making it. That's not to say the shadows disappeared. There are still nights when I dream of my grandmother, her voice soft, her necklace shining against Emily's skin instead of mine. There are still moments when my mother's words echo in my head. "It's just jewelry. Be a team player." But then I walk into a mentorship meeting and see a young woman stand taller because she finally believes her ideas matter. Or I sit across from Lucas at our chipped kitchen table, his hand brushing mine as we eat takeout straight from cartons. Or I laugh so hard with friends that I nearly spill red wine onto the rug. And I realize, I may have been exiled from the family I was born into, but I have built an empire of my own. And unlike theirs, mine is made of love, not lies. People assume family betrayals end with shouting matches or slammed doors. They picture dramatic scenes, tears, screaming, maybe even a glass shattering on the floor. But the truth, most betrayals don't end in fire. They end in silence. And silence is a decision. Months passed after Emily's wedding. My career grew, my mentorship program flourished. Our home became a gathering place for laughter and love. For a while, I allowed myself to believe I'd slipped free of the Whitmore orbit entirely. Until one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I still recognized. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or maybe old habit, got the better of me. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "Clara, I need your help. Emily's marriage is going through a rough patch. Is struggling. You know how she gets. We can't keep her afloat on our own. You're good at managing things. I told your father you'd step in." I let the silence stretch. She rushed to fill it. "You're her sister. Blood is blood." For years I would have folded at those words, desperate for any scrap of belonging. But now I simply breathed. My voice was calm, almost gentle when I finally said, "I'm not your fixer anymore, Mom." Don't be dramatic." "No," I interrupted, steady. "I spent my whole life holding Emily together, and every time I reached for your hand, you pulled it away. I won't do it anymore." She sputtered, offended, as though my refusal was an act of cruelty. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply ended the call. And for the first time, the silence after hanging up didn't feel like exile. Felt like freedom. Few weeks later, Emily herself reached out. She asked to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Partly out of curiosity, partly because some wounds only scar if you let the blade rest. She arrived late, draped in designer clothes that couldn't hide the exhaustion on her face. Her wedding ring caught the light, but her eyes were dim. We sat across from each other in a corner booth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she touched the necklace at her throat, the necklace, and said softly, almost defensively, "Mom told me it didn't matter. She said you'd never wear it anyway." I studied her. For years I would have snapped back, demanded it, raged at the injustice. But rage is a chain, and I'd already broken mine. So I said simply, "It wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise." Her mouth tightened. She looked away. I didn't know what else to do. Everyone expected me to shine. I nodded slowly. "And you did. My expense. At your own too." Her eyes flicked back to mine, searching for a fight. But I didn't give her one. Instead, I pushed my coffee aside, stood and said quietly, "I don't need it back. Keep it if you must. But understand, you can't steal what I've already built." Her lips parted, but no words came. I walked out, leaving her with the necklace heavy against her chest. And for once I didn't look back. At home that night, I opened the folder on my laptop. For later. All the voicemails, screenshots, texts, and proof sat neatly arranged like ammunition waiting to be fired. For a long time I stared at it. My finger hovered over the trackpad. One click and I could expose them all. Every cruel word, every betrayal, every lie. But I closed the folder. Because the truth is, I didn't need revenge. My life was the answer. The work I did, the women I mentored, the home I shared with Lucas, the laughter of friends echoing in my kitchen. Those were the receipts. Those were my justice. I still keep the folder, tucked away like a fire extinguisher you hope never to use. But I don't open it. I don't feed it. I don't let it grow. Instead, I feed the empire I've built, the one made of resilience, love, and chosen family. I learned the hard way that some promises are broken, some inheritances stolen, some wounds left unhealed. But I also learned that the greatest inheritance is the one you craft with your own hands. My parents may never apologize. Emily may never understand. But their absence no longer defines me. Their betrayal no longer chains me. They define me.